Hello, this is Mark from My Keys to Music. Thanks for joining me on this video. I wanted to make a brief video and talk about the brand new announcement from Nord, the Nord Electro 7. The time frame of this video is just 1 week before the NAMM show here in 2026. It's January 2026. Nord has announced it today, as of this morning, but they will actually start manufacturing it and shipping it later in the year. They're looking at second quarter of 2026, which is bad because now we have to wait for it, but good because you'll have extra time to save your pennies, because like most Nord keyboards, this is going to be a sizable investment and something that you need to consider whether it's fits your budget or not. And if it does fit your budget, is the Nord Electro 7 the one for you, or should you be looking at a Nord Stage 4? Or any number of Nord keyboards that are available today. Or you can even go used. If this is your first Nord keyboard, you don't necessarily have to buy brand new, latest, greatest. There's always better deals used. But I'll have to be honest with you, the Nord keyboards are expensive no matter how you buy them, because they do hold their value really, really well. Even a used Nord keyboard is going to be a pretty penny for most people's budgets. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We don't have much collateral. We do have some specifications on the website, but we have limited pictures. So I'll take the one picture that we can use here to get some details out of it, and I'll walk you through it in my normal way. And while I do that, I may talk a little bit about the Nord Electro 6, which is the previous generation of this new up-and-coming keyboard. And I may also sprinkle in attributes from the Nord Wave 2, which is a full-fledged synthesizer from Nord, or the Nord Stage 3 or 4, which are the latest models from, or the most recently released models that Nord has to offer in their full-fledged stage keyboard. And the Stage 3 and the Stage 4 include a full synth engine. The Electro here is not a full synth engine, but it's much closer to a synth engine than it ever has been before. I'd say it features 1/3 to 1/2 of what you'd see in a full-fledged synth engine offered by Nord. Okay, so let's start on the left side. Before we even talk about what's there, let's talk about what's not there. And missing from the Electro is the pitch bend and the mod wheel. And this is no surprise. There's no such thing as a Nord Electro that has a pitch bend or pitch stick or a mod wheel. I think this is one of their clear lines in the sand where they never break this rule, which is Electro keyboard will not have a pitch stick and a mod wheel. Now, why am I making up such a big deal out of that? Normally I don't. Normally I say that's perfectly fine for a Nord Electro to not have those features, because those are traditionally put inside a synth keyboard, a keyboard that has a full synth engine. You'd expect to have those controllers. But this is a gray area for me, because now we're at a point where you're offering some filter capability and some different waveform generation capabilities here on the Electro 7. So you are now getting very close to that gray line of you probably should consider, a pitch stick and a mod wheel. But if they did that, it could potentially cannibalize the sales of their full-fledged synths like the Nord Wave 2 and so on. But, the Nord Wave 2 has 4 layers. This really has 1 synth layer. So there's still some clear lines in the sand. But one little bright spot is typically with the Nord Electro keyboards, you can take a second keyboard, play that second keyboard with that second keyboard's pitch stick, and you'll hear the sound from the Nord Electro 7 with the pitch stick attributes of the keyboard that's controlling it. However, that's a compromise. It really is a compromise to have to use a second keyboard in order to get a pitch stick or a mod wheel. And if you're really seeing that as a deal breaker, don't buy an Electro. Buy a Nord Wave 2 or buy a Nord Stage 4, for example. And then you'll get all those doodads and more. Here we have the master volume, and then below that we have the synth vibrato. So we have a dedicated area for synth vibrato, which we didn't before on any previous Electro. Yes, we had a vibrato setting. Let me check that. Well, we had an effect called Vibe, which is short for vibrato, but it works a little differently in that it's part of the effects section on the Electro 6. This is a dedicated area, and I think what you're going to hear here is the natural vibrato, which was introduced in the Nord Stage 4, where that vibrato is a touch above any vibrato that they had created before. And it's particularly useful with a synth. So if If you want to make a traditional wavy synth sound using vibrato, having a dedicated section here will bring some authenticity to that. So it's a nice feature to have that. Now, right to the right of that, we have the organ engine, and it features the rotary speaker, which has some new features for the Electro 7, which it didn't before. We have the XY coordinates, where that's the mic positioning in terms of where the mic might pick up the location of where it is relative to the rotary speaker that it's emulating. We have a wide and a close section here as far as options. We have a bass wide option, which I'm not even sure how this sounds. I think a lot of this was introduced with the Nord Organ 3, which I don't own, so I haven't heard those personally very closely, but I think that these features will give you more options for better authenticity when it comes to emulating any organ, most specifically the B3. So if you're looking for the most authentic B3 organ, I think the Electro 7 is going to win above the Nord Electro 6, or even the Nord Stage 4 for that matter. It'll probably be neck and neck with the Nord organ, the Organ 3. So I'm glad that they introduced that and continue to improve where they can. They innovate on one keyboard and then bring that innovation typically to other keyboards that have a similar engine, in this case, the organ engine. Okay. Then you have the usual stop mode, which just stops the speaker. You can fix the angle so you can determine where in the rotation that horn is going to face when it stops. We have a slow and fast setting, so that's just toggling between slow and fast. And then what you don't see here, but what's typically under the hood in the settings, is you can determine the percentage of horn versus the rotor at the bottom. So you can distinguish how much percentage on each. You can also distinguish the speed of the acceleration of those as they speed up or slow down. And you can also distinguish the overall speed of the horn versus the speaker on the bottom. Then to the right of that, we have the on-off button for the section itself, and then the zone of where that section would play, lower or upper, and then the overall volume of the organ, just the organ by itself, independent of the master volume. So that way you can mix all three layers, organ, piano, and synth. Below that, we have the octave up and down and optional sustain pedal. Traditionally, when you have an organ set up and you set to a preset that uses an organ, the sustain pedal option is off because B3s don't have a built-in sustain pedal by default, but it comes in very handy to turn that on and save it in your programs so that you can do things like use the sustain pedal when you're playing an organ. If you want to lay down, something you want to be held, it's nice to have that sustain pedal option. That sustain pedal option is available on all three engines, by the way. Below that, we have the drawbar settings. It looks like we have preset 1 and 2. Then there's a lock option, which I'm not entirely sure what that is. And then we have the drawbar live settings, which adopts whatever the drawbars are set to. It'll set the lights to the physical drawbar locations. Speaking of drawbars, now is a good time to bring to your attention that all three versions of the Nord Electro 7 have physical drawbars accompanied by their LED lights next to that. So you can have your cake and eat it too. So you have the physical drawbars for those who like the tactile move, and then those lights will follow that drawbar, allowing you to see it in a way that's easy. Now, as you switch from program to program, your drawbar settings will, in fact, move. The drawbars themselves will not move. They are not physically motorized. But the lights obviously will adhere to whatever program settings you have. So when you are looking at an Electro keyboard or any Nord keyboard that has an organ engine, you always focus on the lights. That's the true location of where you are in terms of what's being presented to you from a sound standpoint. And then these drawbars correlate to the various organ models that are presented. We have the Farfisa, the Vox Continental. We have the B3. We have the pipe organ. We have the soft B3. The soft B3 is for scenarios where you want a B3, but without the keyboard click or other sound artifacts. It will also ignore the percussion settings. And then we have the B3 plus bass, which uses a traditional B3 on the right and then a traditional B3 bass drawbars on the left, which are just the two drawbars representing a real B3. So it's a nice option, and it's especially nice if you are holding down the bass part and you are playing the organ. To the right of that, we have the traditional vibrato chorus features that are featured on all the organ engines from Nord. A new option here for the Electro 7 is this deep chorus. That's something that wasn't available on the Electro 6. It's not even available on the Stage 3 and 4 for that matter. So that's a new feature, probably adopted from the Nord Organ 3. Then here to the right, we have, again, the traditional percussion options. We do have a poly option too, which I think means it'll be triggered when across multiple keys. Probably also adopted from the Nord Organ 3. So all in all, a very powerful Nord engine for organ. Probably the most authentic organ you have ever heard on an Electro. So if you are really into the organ and you are sitting on a Nord Electro 6, this might be a candidate for upgrade, or might be a big tick in the column to say, that's probably worth considering as an option to look at for upgrading. Next, we have the piano engine, just right here represented in this little area. We have, again, the level independent of the master volume, the on-off, the KB zone. So whether you play the piano in the lower section, the upper split, I should say lower split, upper split, or both. And then the octave shift here, sustain pedal option. We have KB touch, which is medium, heavy, and light. That's just how hard you press relative to the loudness that you're hearing. So it tries to adapt to the style of piano player you are. String resonance option is available. Unison option is available, giving you like a chorus and a widening effect on the piano sound, which is good because it gives you some options there. Below that, we have dynamic compression. The timbre, bright, medium, and soft, that's just EQ, and then Dyno 1 and 2, specific to some of the other electromechanical keyboards that it represents. And then a knob here to switch between the pianos that you are selecting. Okay, now, while I'm on this knob here, you'll see that this knob is indicated with a line across the entire circle versus a single line. That means it's a continuous controller knob. It just keeps moving either left or right continuously. And below it, you'll see a little icon representing a list. So if you hold the shift button and toggle the knob, you'll go into list view of within that. This knob also is represented here. And this is an encoder knob that allows you to push on it. Not exactly sure how all that works, but it probably gives you more flexibility where you can push and either select something or push and hold and turn it, and it has a different option. Okay, so that's the piano section. In the middle, we have the program section. Not much new or nothing particularly notable to talk about here, except for perhaps the color OLED display, which to my knowledge is the first of its kind from Nord. Previous to this, we had just a black and white screen. Now we have some color introduced, so some nice things there. I don't know if they're using it and sprinkling it throughout, but right here I see only the three colors, the black, the white, and the red. But it's nice to have some call out here with some distinction. So color OLED display makes sense. The store button, expression pedal where you can assign that or clear it. So that's interesting. It looks like it's almost a form of a morph capable assignment here where maybe you can assign the expression pedal to one thing or another. They made note that some of these things are pedal capable, such as, let's say, the frequency amount here over in the synth section, and some other effects here, which we haven't gotten to yet. So I assume that's where you can assign the pedal, which is great because we've never had that kind of flexibility before on an Electro. Sort of baked in the way it came. It just comes with what it comes. Now we have some flexibility. The typical transpose button here. Not only can you globally transpose an Electro, but you can also transpose program by program. So if you wanted to store a program setting with a specific transposition option, you can do that. Or you can say, hey, for the entire gig, I want to play in B flat, so let's transpose down to semitones, and that will make the entire gig for that entire session transposed. KB split options right here. It does have the X fade capability, which blends the two splits into one to another. So let's say if you have a bass part on the left side of the split and a piano on the right, as you progress up and down through that split zone, you're hearing a blending of the bass and the piano together from a volume standpoint. This is something that was available on the Electro 6, and it continues to be available on the Electro 7. Okay, then the usual selectors here. The only call out is the fact that it has 5 live settings or 5 live locations, whereas I believe the Nord Electro 6 had 4. Also, an important thing to note, which you'll see here as I do the side-by-side comparison and recap, we have 500 program locations versus the 416 from the Nord Electro 6. So a big improvement there. That's a little less than 100 more, but really comes in handy, especially if you are a person who likes to have a lot of variety in their programs and you're storing all kinds of programs and you find yourself running out of room from a location standpoint. Okay, next we have the synth engine. Lots of improvements here. This is probably the biggest distinction between an Electro 6 and a 7. Like I might have mentioned here earlier in the video, I feel that this is about halfway to a full-fledged synth engine. Maybe not halfway, maybe 40%. It is missing the pitch stick and the mod wheel, and that's a big part of what makes a synth a synth. It's missing arpeggiation. It's missing drive. It's missing a lot of the nuance in how the sound is generated. Here we do have 3 options. We have samples, which we had on the Electro 6. We have analog, which is brand new, which allows you to do basic waveforms. I would assume classic waveforms such as sawtooth, square, sine, triangle. Probably even does a few others. I don't know yet. Don't have my hands on it, but hopefully they will add a few others in there as well. And then finally, FM. So if you want to get a little FM synthesis in your life, you'll have that option now, which is really over the top. I mean, to me, that's more of an advanced synth setting that they should probably reserve just strictly for the full-fledged synth engines in other Nord keyboards, but they've put it here. And I think it's even optionally adjustable here where the frequency amount can be adjusted. I'm sorry, not just the frequency amount, the FM synthesis amount can be adjusted here with this same knob if you're in that mode. So that's pretty compelling. So let's just quickly review the synth engine. We have the on-off button like normal, the level, the KB zone, octave up and down, sustain pedal, and vibrato, whether that's on or off, and then vibrato settings indicated by this tiny little triangle pointing downward. If you push and hold that key with the shift button, you'll see the vibrato settings, which incidentally, they have them here as well. So maybe this is a quick hot button to do the exact same thing that this button does when held. Not quite sure. They have a voice mode now, which is the first time on an Electro. We actually can go into mono mode or legato mode and introduce 2 glide settings, or maybe 3 if 1 and 2 are both invoked. So glide 1 and 2, if you don't know what this is essentially portamento, but they call it glide. You can take one key and zip it up to another, and you'll have a glide effect, which is a synthy type of effect. Comes in handy on a lot of songs. It's used a lot of places in music. So to have this feature, it's great. Also new, we have 3 knobs to adjust envelope rather than 2. And then below that, we have the envelope focus. So you can focus your envelope on either the amp envelope, which would focus itself on volume, versus the filter, which would focus the envelope on the frequency that you hear, the amount of highs and lows the sound is letting through relative to the envelope. And then an optional velocity setting here, which if you invoke that, it will then drive that envelope, or at least it looks like it's tied to the filter only, where if you push harder, the sound will be brighter. Not just louder, but brighter as well. So that's a neat option there. Then we have the filter and FM option here, so you can turn the filter on and off. And then within that, you have the amount -10 through +10. That's the amount of filter you want to have affect your sound. And then the resonance, which is an aspect of, typically when you have a synth filter, you'll have a resonance amount with it. And when you add more resonance to a filter, you can start doing things. If you do it to its extreme where it's now providing feedback, you can have laser-like sounds or sounds like you'd hear at the beginning of Tom Sawyer from Rush. That is all, those are sounds and filters that require high amounts of resonance. And when you have that, you can do those sounds, which you could never do before natively on the Nord Electro 6. In order to do sounds like that on the Electro 6 today, you'd have to sample it and bake it in and then play the sample and you get what you get. Now here we have all of this as adjustable native built-in synth controls, which, really do bring the Electro 7 up a notch. And for those of you who've been sitting on the sidelines patiently and happily ignoring the fact that you know nothing about synthesis and you just dial up the sound, maybe you tweak a few of the effects and a few of the volumes, but you steer clear of any kind of synthesis, this is a great introduction to some basic synth controls for the first time perhaps in your life. Say, okay, I'm going to get the Electro 7 and I will use this as an excuse to walk my way in, or maybe crawl my way into learning synthesis, because they've only given me a few controls. They've kept the knife drawer pretty high up. It's safe. They've only given me so much rope here that I can mess up with. So anyway, I just say that in a kidding way, because I do know a lot of people have really not taken the time or had the ambition or the energy to learn synthesis at its root. Now is your first time, an excuse to buy an Electro 7 and use this as an intro to synthesis, your very first intro to synthesis. And you will learn a lot just from these little controls here. And you'll be able to actually do quite a bit with the few controls they've given you, a lot more than you think.
Now, let me clarify something. I'm not saying to go out and buy an Electro 7 if you want a tool to learn basic synthesis. This can be done for free today on the internet without spending multiple thousands of dollars on an Electro 7. I'm just saying, if you're already planning on getting an Electro 7, you'll have the opportunity to slow walk your entry into synthesis based on the starting set of tools they've provided you.
To the right of that, now we have the effects section. And most notable here with the Electro 7 is the fact that you can apply the effects independently across each engine, which means now you won't have to beg and borrow or compromise your effects like you have been for years and years with the Electro series. Meaning, if you decided to use tremolo on your electric piano and you've assigned that to the piano engine, that means you cannot use tremolo on your organ, not that you would, or your synth, which you could likely want to do. So that was a compromise before. You had to pick one or the other. Now you don't have to compromise anymore. Your effects can be applied to all three, one, or none. So that's a huge, huge advantage. And it's a bigger advantage than you think. It's one of those things where, let's say you're using a delay in the piano, but you also want to have a delay, a small delay or a different type of delay on the synth. Well, you couldn't do that before, but now you can. Now, I will say this, as exciting and as compelling as it is to have separate effects assignable to each engine, and it is, reverb is still global. So if you were getting all excited that you could finally do this for reverb, you can't. Reverb is still global. So if you want a wide and if you want a big room for your piano, you're going to be stuck with that big room for your organ and that big room for your synth. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. They have to draw the line somewhere. Probably another reason why you'd want to get a Nord Stage 4, because you just need to have reverb assignable by engine, and you can do that on the Stage series, the Nord Stage 4 series. You can also do it on other keyboards, such as the Nord Wave 2. And then here is where you distinguish whether you're going to have it applied to the organ, the piano, or the synth. And you click this button, you can see where those effects are applied. Okay. I think what Nord does is they try to give you the effects that are most appropriate for the keyboard and the sounds you are most likely going to make with that keyboard. So not all effects are shared across all Nord keyboards. They do sprinkle, let's say there's an 80% crossover where just about every keyboard that Nord makes has a chorus or a flanger or a phaser. But not all of them have the ensemble. Not all of them have various things. Here we have 2-pan options. Not all Nord keyboards have 2-pan options. EQ has been greatly expanded, and again, it's assignable by engine. Again, that is huge. That is really huge because there's so many times where you want to trim the EQ on the organ or bring up the bass on the organ, but once you did that, you had no capability of changing the EQ on the piano. Well, now you can do that. And they also gave you some effects here within the EQ. We've got a suitcase, a small speaker, a twin speaker, a JC speaker, and a bright option. So 5 different effects. You could kind of say that it's the personality of the EQ. It's as if your Nord keyboard was going through that kind of EQ effects processing unit or amplifier. That's what this emulation is here. You can select none, which is the default mode, but having these options now does, in fact, allow you to embellish your EQ quite a bit. And then we have the drive setting, and everything else is pretty much the same as it's always been. We have a bass, a treble, and then what's known as a sweepable or variable EQ in the middle, where you can assign not only the amount that you have, but you can assign the exact frequency range. You only get one range to choose from, but you do get to choose it, and that helps a lot. This is no different than most of the Nord keyboards today when it comes to EQ. And then over here we have the on-off compression. This helps a lot, especially if you're trying to make the organ louder. A lot of times we set our organ drawbars kind of low, where we have, none of them are really over 5, and we have just sort of a low overall setting of drawbars for whatever effect we're going for. But then the problem is you lose a lot of volume. So you can turn on the compressor, boost that volume, and all of a sudden your organ comes to life and it has that meat that you need while still maintaining that subtlety that you have in the drawbar settings. So that compression is a big thing, especially for organ, in my opinion. But I've seen major improvement over the way Nord applies their compression over the years. It's in the latest models, for example, the Nord Stage 4, the compression feature works, in my opinion, much better than it ever has. It's much more appropriately, it's more useful. And then we have the reverb. 5 rooms to choose from: stage room, spring, cathedral, and hall. Love the cathedral reverb. Awesome. Really awesome. The fact that they have it for the first time on a Nord Electro keyboard is stellar. We also have a chorale option, which will give you a little bit of a detune aspect to that on the tail of that reverb. And then really nice feature, the bright and the dark settings for your reverb. So you have normal, which is not illuminated, bright and dark. Nice options there for reverb. So even though I complain that it's limited where the reverb applies against all 3 engines simultaneously, at least they gave you more reverb choices. Now, what's interesting here is there is a dry-wet setting and then a layer send setting. So I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I think I'm going to like that feature. So when I really understand what it is and maybe can demo it, I'll probably have follow-up videos on all this. All right, so that's the walkthrough on the panel for the Nord Electro 7. Lots of compelling things to look at here. Let me quickly go over to the AI comparison, and let's walk through that quickly just to see that we're not missing anything. Here we have the different models. This is the key bed offerings. So the Nord Electro 7 and 6 both offer 61 key, 73 key, and a 73 HP key, which stands for Hammer Action Portable. The big distinction here, though, on the Electro 7 is that they've partnered with Kawai, as they probably have done here for the last several years, and they've built a better, in my opinion, it's probably going to be much better, HP offering. The HP offerings for the Nord Electro 6, some of the earlier Nord pianos, the Nord Stage 3, have been less than superb. They've been heavy, too heavy, loud, clunky, and overall, they don't get a lot of love in terms of being stellar. Some people love the HP that Nord has offered, but with this partnership with Kawai, I think you're going to see a marked improvement over the HP. So if you've always avoided the HP, knowing that you are going to be dealing with something that's substandard, this is going to be much better. Now, I don't have it here to prove that fact, but we do know that the Nord Stage 4 has keybeds from Kawai, and the Nord Grand has keybeds from Kawai, and everything that I've read and everything that has been touted is that these are heads and tails above anything prior when it comes to a weighted keyboard feel. It's authentic, it feels natural, it feels good, it gets rave reviews. So I think this is a big improvement. So if you are sitting on a Nord Electro 6 HP and you grind your teeth every time you play it because it's not quite what you were hoping for or what you actually need from an expression standpoint or what have you, the Electro 7 is a nice option. So good for a trade maybe, huh? So let's take a look at some of the other things here. The sound engines are essentially the same. We have organ, piano, and synth. You still are limited to 1 layer each. For those of you who might be raising your hand and say, well, can I put a bass sound from the synth on the left side of the split and a trumpet sound also from the synth engine on the right side of the split? Can I do that with an Electro? And the answer still is no, you cannot. You are limited to one sound, even though you can split them. You can split engines in different zones. You can't split sounds, or you can't make two sounds from one engine. One engine, one sound. You either pick the bass or you pick the trumpet in my example. So if you know right away that you can't live with that, don't even look at an electro. Just go right to a stage 4 or stage 3 if stage 4 is out of your price range. The Nord Wave 2 will also do that with 4 layers, and you can start adding more synth layers to your life. And yes, you'll be able to do the bass, the trumpet, and maybe even 1 more or 2 more if you go with the Nord Wave 2. The display we already talked about, that's the OLED display, color versus black and white. Seamless transitions on both. This is where you are sustaining a note from one program, you switch to another program, and you have a nice smooth transition where you still hear the old sound while introducing the new sound while you switch it. Or I should say, introduce the new program without losing the old sound. That's a better way to say that. The program settings, 500 on the new Electro 7, 416, not listed here, but 416 on the Nord Electro 6. Here's another feature I didn't talk about yet. We have split points. We have 6 split points on an Electro 6. That's the lights that indicate where you can make your split points. You have 9 locations on the Electro 7. That's a big improvement there. Transposing and tuning are the same for both. They both do up and down 6 semitones for program transpose and up 50 cents for the global fine tuning. So pretty much the same thing there. They both have an auxiliary keyboard option. They both have the same USB MIDI capability. That is to update the keyboard, to move sounds back and forth from the keyboard, and to use the USB for MIDI. What you don't see listed here, because it's not a feature that Nord offers, is there's no sound over USB or audio over USB. Doesn't exist in Nordland, probably never will. If you want sound, that's going to come out of the traditional 1/4-inch jack from the back of the keyboard. You have a mono and stereo setting on the Electro 7. Expression pedal seems to be a few more options on the Electro 7 than on the Electro 6, which is nice to see that. They continue to expand that. The keybed itself, I think, is identical in terms of its size and positioning and key starting points. We do have that triple sensor with you when you go with the Kawai hammer action. That's the one I plan on buying. I'm going to go with the 73, which I like 73. 76 is, it's a little long, but it gets heavier to carry. 73 is probably good. The hammer action 73, I think, is a sweet spot. It will be a sweet spot for a lot of people. And because this is the Kawai action and triple sensor, people are going to like that. I think that's going to be a big improvement there. Organ models, similar. We have on the Electro 7 the soft B3, which is not available on the 6. And they both have the B3 plus bass option, though. So a lot of similar things here, just the one difference being the B3 soft option. Organ performance features. We do have that vibrato chorus in a deep mode, dual organ mode here. I don't know what they don't list a dual organ. I didn't see a button called dual organ, but I assume that there's a dual organ capability on this Electro 7. It's just listed in a different way or attacked in a different way. Yeah, but for the most part, similar, but like I already mentioned quite a bit, we have those physical drawbars on the Electro 7 for all 3 keybed models, which is a nice feature. And speaking of that, we have the optional half moon switch that you can mount, which is available in the 61 and 73. I'm not 100% sure it works for the Hammer Action Portable. Nord's philosophy on this is if you're getting a Hammer Action Portable keybed, you are a piano-centric keyboardist versus an organ-centric keyboardist. So that's where they've made the distinction, and you'll see in a lot of keyboards where the half moon switch is only available for the semi-weighted keybed models, not for the ones that are Hammer Action Portable. Rotary speaker. We do have a few more options on the rotary speaker for the Electro 7 than we do on the Electro 6, where you can adjust the angles and the stop point and things like that. Dedicated tube drive, that's interesting. Piano categories. It says here that it has the miscellaneous mallet options, but you can get those miscellaneous mallet options on the Electro 6. It's just that I don't think they come installed by default, but if you look at the Nord Sound Manager, you can install the vibraphone and the marimba sounds in the piano engine of the Nord Electro 6, as well as the 7 here, obviously. Piano features, we get the string resonance. They both have that. This is the timbre settings. We do have the timbre settings on the Electro 6, but they're listed simply as bright, mid, soft. I'm not sure if dyno 1 and 2 are included in that. No, I don't think the Electro 6 has the dyno option that you see here on the Electro 7. Both feature 120 voice polyphony, and we do have that unison option on the Electro 7, which is not available on the Electro 6. Then we have the synthesizer, which is, a big improvement on the Electro 7. If you always wanted a little bit more synth, but you're not quite ready for a dedicated synth, this is probably a great keyboard for you. We've got the sample capabilities, the analog waveforms, and the FM synthesis as sound generation methods in the synth engine, with filter options and different things you can assign, along with mono, legato, and glide, and a unison amount, a vibrato amount, 30 voice polyphony. Interesting, only 30 voice polyphony versus 46 voice polyphony, so there's more polyphony in the Electro 6. And also, Nord changes the technology behind the way they assign polyphony. So there's options they have under the hood to assign polyphony in ways that can make a 30-voice polyphony keyboard sound like it has actually more than 30 voices. We have dedicated effects sections. You have to say a long pause after that, because if you can assign the effects independent in each engine, that's huge. The effects, I'm not even really going to compare those two. They both have a wide variety of effects. I think there's probably more nuance in the settings for an Electro 7, so I would say improvement there. I wouldn't say it's heads and tails improvement, but improvement. Amp EQ, big improvement there where you can assign different types of EQs. You have the twin, the small suitcase, JC. I guess that's British drive. So that's a nice feature. Delay, it looks like we have filtered delay where you can apply the low pass, high pass, and band pass filter on the delay tail, which is kind of neat. You can't do that on Electro 6. Compressor, they both had compressor, but I think that you're going to see this dedicated compressor be more capable, more appropriate, just better. Reverb, more reverb options, where before you only had 3 rooms, now you have 5 rooms. I guess you do have the bright mode with the Electro 6. Let me confirm that. Yes, you do have a bright mode with the Electro 6. You don't have the dark mode, and you don't have the chorale option. So better reverb on the Electro 7. Audio output's the same. Monitor output's the same, or input as it were. Headphones, the same. One expression pedal, and it looked like it was semi-assignable from that button we saw earlier on in this video. Then we have the sustain rotary foot control, and rotary controller foot switch. Looks like the Electro 7 is compatible with the Nord Sustain Pedal 2, but the Nord Triple Pedal 1. And that makes sense because if you look at the back panel of an Electro 7, you don't see that special jack that is specifically designed for the Nord Triple Pedal 2, which right now is available on the Nord Stage 4, for example. But you do have the Nord Sustain Pedal 2 option, which is nice. And I wonder if you can take advantage of that where you can add expression in that pedal. MIDI, same, 5-pin in and out, nothing fancy there. Power, same. Both come with a user manual and power cord. Dimensions are similar. Let's just take a quick look at dimensions. The 61 key is, I'm looking at the millimeters because it's more granular. 901, 104, 294 versus 997 and 296. It's pretty close. We're talking just millimeters apart from a dimensional standpoint. 73 key, gosh, they're both 1066. Just a little bit of difference there. And yeah, pretty much the same. And pretty much the same as well. Just millimeters difference between the two, which means that you can use your case from the Electro 6 with the Electro 7 if you happen to buy the same size key bed. Weight, that's always an important factor. Looks like we did get a little heavier on the Electro 7 by about a little less than a pound. On the 61 key, we have nearly the same weight on the 73, still a little heavier. Quite a bit heavier on the HP versus the previous HP. Well, I say quite a bit. It ends up being 3 pounds. But it is notable, more of a notable difference than some of the other weights here. But, I'll trade those 2 or 3 pounds to get me a better HP experience and feel any day. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. And if I did, just call me out on the comments and we'll clarify it as best we can. This is brand new. I've had no physical time with this keyboard. It's not even out yet. I'm just doing all of this from deduction, educated guesses, and a panel that is not even fully viewable. In any case, thanks for joining me on this video. Feel free to keep the conversation going in the comments. If you are interested in learning this keyboard, similar in a way that I've just done now, but in a more granular approach, I have on-demand video training at mykeystomusic.com, where you can come and take one of my courses, and we go through this, and we spend hours and hours and hours digging into all the nitty-gritty details while providing actual real-world samples of sounds that you might need to emulate songs, or different approaches, different genres, different tapestries of sound. All of that is explored in my master courses. This one is something I do plan on doing, probably have it out late 2026, depending on my schedule. And it's something that I would most likely call Master the Nord Electro 7, and it'll be available for purchase at mykeystomusic.com. I also have a Patreon site. You can get extra content that doesn't fit in any of my courses, all the extra sawdust, if you will. And there I often make sounds available for purchase and different experiences that go beyond what I do in my courses or here on YouTube. Thanks for joining me. Great to be back. Sorry I haven't been around in a little while, but I'm still planning on content for 2026, and we'll keep the wheels turning here, and we'll keep the Nord engine moving forward. Thanks again.